Our next reader is Kelly Hitchcock. Kelly is an up-and-coming writer in Austin, Texas. She is the author of various poems about the randomness of life, several short stories, random creative nonfiction works, and the coming-of-age novel, The Redheaded Stepchild. She is world-renowned among a readership of 5 people and growing. Raised by a single father in the small town of Buffalo, Missouri, Kelly has fond memories of cash-strapped life in the Ozarks that strongly influence her writing and way of life. When she's not writing API documentation for money or writing poetry and fiction for unmoney, Kelly enjoys catering to the whims of a high-maintenance rescue dog, I know how those are, frequenting Austin's many concert venues with her husband, and breaking things in no particular order. She is an avid volunteer and fundraiser for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. She'll be reading tonight from her book, Portrait of a Woman in Ink.
Thank you so much to Malvern for having me. It's so great that the Austin scene has a place for small presses to share their work. And for those of you on this side, you have my good side, so be grateful for that. So my book is Portrait of Woman in Ink. It's a collection of short stories about women and their tattoos. And I got the idea for this book based on a tattoo that I got in my younger days, 2 days after I married my first husband at age 19, which is just as great an idea as it sounds. And I really wanted to cover it up for a long time, but I was like, I won't cover it up until this happens. And it took a very long time for that thing to happen. And just thinking about my life and the things that led me to this tattoo, I was like, wow, this is like a portrait of myself, you know, captured in time. So then I got to thinking about friends that I had who also had tattoos, and I was like, I wonder what the story is behind theirs, because it's probably a very deeply personal story, and turns out I was right. So I got to asking them about their tattoos, and I was like, wow, there's really something here that I want to explore. After talking with my friends and with their permission, I put together this anthology of stories that all build on one another, and one flows from the next. And since Becky mentioned that I volunteer for the CF Foundation, the story that I'm going to read from tonight is from my best friend whose husband has cystic fibrosis, so it's been a long struggle for her. So what I'm going to read is the story about Beth's rose vine, and this is her tattoo right here, for those of you who wonder what that looks like. Beth Jordan began sifting through shirts in her closet one by one. At some point, she knew something would jump out of her as the perfect thing to wear tonight, but at the moment, she was blanking. Every top she tossed out of her line of sight on the closet rack seemed old and worn out. It wasn't like she could just wear any outfit tonight. This was her 10th anniversary party. Behind her, she heard a faint howl from Mrs. Norris, the cat who was aloof even by cat standards. Her front paw grabbing a bracelet out of her precisely organized jewelry box. She recognized the bracelet. It was something she'd bought at one of those premier designs parties where she'd been one of 2 guests. She'd bought a few things out of sympathy for the hostess, with money she really didn't need to be spending. She didn't know why she always let her friends talk her into going to those damn parties, any more than she knew why she always felt compelled to buy something. And Norris put one of the large translucent amber stones in her mouth and jumped down to lay the bracelet at Beth's feet. Beth looped the bracelet around her big toe and brought it up to meet her hand, gazing at Norris's old black eyes. "You think so, missus?" she asked the cat, working the clasp around her left wrist, admiring the simple antique wedding ring her husband Charlie had given her 10 years ago. All her friends hated Norris. Of all the Jordan's cat, they thought Norris was a hateful bitch who liked clawing them through their blue jeans, pretending it was an accident, casually walking past their glasses of red wine on the coffee table, and knowingly knocking them over with her black and orange tail. But Mrs. Norris was Beth's favorite. Her friends never saw these moments, when she would drag a piece of matching jewelry out of Beth's closet as she was getting ready for the day, or when she would jump up on the counter just to open the utensil drawer while Beth was cooking. Mrs. Norris wasn't a bitch. She was just misunderstood. Beth paused in the bedroom to admire the outfit Mrs. Norris had inspired, posing in front of the heirloom mirror that used to belong to Charlie's grandmother. She wished she was skinnier. She always wished she was skinnier. If she could have just an inch less around the waistline, she thought, she'd look almost perfect. She turned to the side to get a better profile view, instantly recognizing the faded rose vine tattoo wrapped around her left ankle. She wrinkled up her face. She'd grown irritated with the tattoo. To her, it was just another sign of her impulsiveness, her inability to think things through. She hadn't thought college through. She'd gone into theater and rarely studied, transferred to a smaller private school her senior year, and gotten her teaching certificate just to avoid being a stereotypical starving actress waiting tables between auditions. She hadn't thought through her first career. As a high school classroom teacher and debate coach, she'd spent nearly every weekend in the company of prima donna teenagers, taking long and lonely bus rides from tournament to tournament, then dealing with their prima donna parents the next Monday. She hadn't thought through buying their first house. It was a beautiful, a vaulted ceiling home on a quiet suburban cul-de-sac less than 2 miles away from her own parents. It was big enough for Beth, Charlie, their 4 cats, and the children they would never have. She hadn't thought things through when they'd adopted their first child, a teenage girl who'd been a student at Beth's school. She'd done drugs in their beautiful cul-de-sac house and gotten arrested more times than Beth could count and run away from home only to show up at their doorstep just begging for help a short time later. But when you were married to someone with cystic fibrosis, every decision was an impulse. You didn't really have time to think things through because you just might not have the time. 12 years ago, when Beth and Charlie were just 2 16-year-olds in love, everyone had told them to slow down, that they had their whole lives ahead of them, even though they knew in their hearts it wasn't true. 12 years ago, Charlie wasn't even expected to live to see 30. Today, 30 was less than a year away for Charlie, and Beth was getting dressed for their 10th anniversary party. Still, she did hate the tattoo she'd gotten when she and Charlie had become engaged. Beth tried not to think of the 2 pathology chapters she needed to read tonight for nursing school as she walked into the brightly colored private party room at Incredible Pizza, where they'd decided to celebrate their 10th anniversary with all their friends. Blown up pictures of Beth and Charlie on their Disney World honeymoon lined the walls of the room, covering up the constellation someone had painstakingly painted. Beth glanced up at them, and she wished she could snap her fingers and be as thin as she was in the honeymoon photos. Judging from the size of the room, she figured it was mostly used for children's birthday parties. All their friends and family were coming, and she hoped they wouldn't look at these pictures and think, man, she really let herself go. Their town was too small for a Chuck E. Cheese and too religious for a Dave & Buster's. Incredible Pizza was their compromise, a smaller Chuck E. Cheese, but without the sinful bar of Dave & Buster's. It was Christian-owned, a fact that you could discern from the fact that they asked you for your church bulletin discount as soon as you walked in the door. Beth's friend Lacey called it inedible pizza, the almighty buffet with all the crucifixes. Granted, it was a ridiculous place to have a 10th anniversary party, but most of their friends were starting to have families of their own, and Beth and Charlie had always loved playing arcade games together. Maybe, she thought, it was just a lasting childlike feeling that came with getting married when you were barely adults in the first place. But childlike or no, Beth really wanted a drink. Happy anniversary! The guests who'd already arrived chanted in union, already pulling out their cameras for pictures. Beth grabbed Charlie's hand and began to lean into his bony frame. Just a second, babe, he said, pushing her away slightly so he could cough, pounding the right side of his chest with the palm of his open hand. Are you okay? One of Beth's aunts asked. Beth knew Charlie hated being asked if he was okay. People, especially those who hadn't been around them for the past 12 years, either didn't know he was terminally sick and assumed he just had a cold or something. That, or they knew he was terminally sick and worried that every single coughing fit he had was a precursor to his next long visit to the respiratory wing at University Hospital. The "are you okay" question irritated the hell out of him. He just wanted the people to see him as a normal guy who happened to cough a lot, which he was 90% of the time. He didn't want to be impolite, though, and knew that he was better off waiting until people knew him better before he told them to knock it off. Yep, let's do this, Charlie said, straightening and pulling Beth in for a picture. Beth wrapped her right arm around his shoulder and her left around his midsection, feeling the ribs beneath his favorite t-shirt, a gift from his first ever set of chemistry students, and the rock-hard abs he had from the constant coughing. She let herself discreetly admire his sculpted muscles for a split second before the familiar twinge of guilt, the one that reminded her of how those muscles got to be strong in the first place. She managed to crack a half smile and say cheese. The "Are you okay, Aunt?" leaned in to read Charlie's t-shirt. Johnny was a scientist, but now he is no more. What he thought was H2O was H2SO4, she read, a confused look spreading across her face. I don't get it. Now I'm going to skip to the very end of this chapter. Charlie had been so wiped out on the way home, he'd pulled over so Beth could drive. He'd snored softly in the passenger seat, still wearing the bright orange foam 10-gallon hat he'd won with his skee-ball ticket fortune. He now sat in front of his computer, the blue glow from the monitor illuminating the steam that came out of his nebulizer in random puffs. Beth turned up the TV so she could hear the episode of The Office over the noise of Charlie's vest. A loud, vibrating contraption connected by tubes to a machine they took with them every time they traveled. It helped break up the mucus in his lungs so he could cough some of it up. They called the vest their third car, since it had cost more than both their cars at the time, and took up what would have been the equivalent of a garage in their tiny campus apartment. Beth sat on her hip, head resting and one hand propped up by an elbow on the arms of the sofa the cats had scratched to pieces. She looked at the open pharmacology textbook waiting for her on the coffee table with disdain. Trumpet, their boisterous, talkative cat, laid down in the crook of her knees, inching the blanket, covering up Beth's feet, exposing the ankle wrapped in the rosevine tattoo. Trumpet was clingy and needy like that. She kicked herself with the tattooed foot for even thinking about their next visit to the hospital earlier, even though she knew it would happen. It always did, every year or so. Charlie shrugged off the vest and walked over to grab the pillow he always put under his head during the next phase of his treatment. He stuffed the pillow under his arm so he could pull the blanket down over her exposed tattoo and tuck it under her cold feet. She tried to picture what the tattoo would look like in 10 years, but obviously she'd never been that good at envisioning the future. But that went with the territory of being a CF spouse. In 10 years, Charlie would be 3 years past the average life expectancy for a CFer. They'd be traveling the country in their Airstream trailer as she took nursing contracts in the part of the country of their choice, assuming it wouldn't take their house long to sell. Charlie sat up to cough, bracing himself with his left arm. Beth's throat tightened. She could barely even see 1 year into the future, let alone 10. The tattoo was already starting to fade. The once black vine, now a dark drab olive green. Why did they always turn greenish instead of fading to gray? Still, if it faded to green, it would only make the rose vine look healthier, more alive, and the edges of the red petals would have the hint of pink they always got when they were at their fullest bloom. Maybe she'd keep the tattoo after all.
Does anyone have any questions?
I'll try not to stutter through them, I promise. Yeah?
What are you working on now?
What am I working on now? Over Memorial Day weekend, I just finished my third novel, and when I say finished, I mean finished the first draft, which means the real work is really just starting. But it's my first long-form novel that's not a collection of stories. It's about a girl who is a kleptomaniac, but only at her gym, which was really just a way for me to rip on the stereotypical people that exist in every gym. Like the guy who grunts and the old ladies who floss with towels in the locker room, and the people who are just full of themselves. We've all seen them and know them, and I really just wanted something funny to write about for a change, especially since this book was so serious and emotional, and those of you who know me know that I'm not a very serious and emotional person at all, so that's what I'm working on now.
Anything else?
Yeah.
So, is every story in that book inspired by a tattoo that you
Yes.
saw and spoke to something?
Yes. Yeah?
Is Beth a Harry Potter fan?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why Mrs.
Then
Norris
Mrs. Norris.
is Mrs. Norris.
Yeah.
It's true. And Mrs. Norris passed away last year. Very, very sad. She still posts pictures of her on Facebook every day for some reason. Thank you so much.